Welcome back to the Piping Pastor. On a very hot day here in El Paso, we are definitely into our summertime temperatures, the low 90s today. So, on to the cold brew. The cold brew pitcher, it will be a mainstay from now to the rest of summer, and I have no doubt. I was hoping for a more moderate start to the summer, maybe, and maybe another cool week or two of 70-degree temperatures. It was not to be the case. And I have two of these microphones, and they have clips that go opposite directions, so that if you're depending on what you're wearing, you can clip them one way or the other. And I don't like this clip because it goes backwards from where I think it should be, so it doesn't let you see the little light on the front, which you know it's not a bad thing until you're recording a video and you're halfway through and you realize your mic cut out as you're editing later. So if you see me doing that every once in a while, I'm not trying to be annoying. I'm just trying to make sure I don't have to re-record. Well, on this rather warm day with my cold brew coffee, I am smoking in my Boswell billiard pipe some Billy Bud from Cornell and Deal. It's okay. I got this, well, one of my travels several months ago. I brought Northwoods with me, and I typically bring a Virginia and a Latakia blend when I travel. Sometimes I'll pack three. I'll do Carter Hall as well for a morning pint, but usually it's just do Latakia and do Virginia, and that kind of covers me for however long I'm out there in the wilderness. Um, and on this particular trip, I didn't pack enough Northwoods to bring with me, and so we ended our trip out in the middle of nowhere, and then on the way back, stopping at a hotel because we were way far out there. And across from the hotel, there was a pipe and tobacco store, so I popped in there to get me a Latakia blend to get me for the last 2 or 3 days, and the only one they had was this Billy Bud. And it's a Latakia Forward English, I think is how it was described, but it has cigar leaf in it as well. So it's a Latakia English with the addition of cigar leaf. And it's not bad. I'd have preferred if they had Pirate Cake or even Haunted Bookshop would have worked. But when it comes to the kind of blend I was looking for with regard to Cornell and Deal choices, anyway. But I never had this before. The description seemed nice, and I was like, fine, I'll give it a go. And it's not bad. I will finish this time, but on my rating scheme, typically thing that I use, I wouldn't buy it again. There's nothing in this that stands out enough for me to make it a worthwhile purchase, let alone sell it. So, checking in. Or should be fine. I'll stop checking. So, topic for today. Taking a little break from the poetry in the Bible because I watched a couple of videos this past week, and I think even though they were completely unrelated, I think that they both kind of spoke to the same issue. One was by Alan Harrison. Used to be the Pipe Cottage, then he changed it to Dr. Allen, or whatever. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of the guy. I think he's a bit emotional and erratic for my taste. Seems like a nice enough chap. He just needs a little seasoning, I think. I think he's quit YouTube like 3 times and stomped off in a rage and came back. But in any case, I agree with his views on agrarian society, and I do think that smaller agrarian communities would be of a benefit to us culturally speaking. And I'm not being reactionary and saying, oh, go back to the good old days of the antebellum United States, right? But I think smaller local economies are far more beneficial to people culturally than large transnational corporations and big box stores and things like that. So he and I agree in that area. But anyway, a lot of his other views I don't agree with. In any case, I sometimes watch his channels too, though, because I don't just watch channels I agree with. I watch channels where I may have a different opinion than the person who's hosting, because I like to have my opinions challenged. And I don't want to live in a small bubble of people who agree with me. That's how we get insular. That's how we end up in silos. But different topic. In any case, he's been doing a couple of videos recently, essentially kind of talking about the boomer generation and the problems that have come out of that generation. And and again, I somewhat agree. I'm leery of labeling entire generations with motivations and failures, because it's a big group of people. But speaking in terms of meta narratives, I do think he made a good point. And then that spoke to another video I saw with Malcolm Guite. He was on Pints with Aquinas. Is that what it's called? In any case, it came up on my feed not because I'm a Catholic. Obviously, I'm not a Catholic, and I don't follow the Pints with Aquinas program on YouTube even. But I follow Malcolm Guite, and he's my favorite contemporary poet. Bar none. Guy's just a genius. He's a brilliant poet and just a really cool cat. Anyway, so it came up and he was doing this video on Pints with Aquinas, and he was talking about the lack of culture, the destruction of culture that the last two generations have really been responsible for, and how we've ended up today where young people, and I think from his age, he was talking about young people, he's talking about people like in their 40s and below, feel disconnected from their own culture and feel like they don't have a culture of their own. And he kind of laid this at the feet of this trinity of postmodern thinkers who have destroyed the idea of culture. And he said Nietzsche and Freud and Karl Marx were the three most influential people in that kind of movement that removed people from culture. And when he's speaking of culture, he's talking about, like I just mentioned, a meta narrative, us being part of a larger story undergirding everything. Because when you try to define culture, defining culture is notoriously difficult. You can get neck deep in sociological research for years with people trying to define culture. What culture is? Is it music? Is it religious traditions? Is it food? Or are those the outgrowth of culture? Is culture some kind of universal grounds of which people commonly engage with, and then the music and food and clothing and traditions and things like that kind of come out of that? And I think that's the more accurate terminology. I think those particular items are just um, they're accidental aspects of culture, of meta narrative, of a larger story connecting us together. So I think that disconnect, and I would even go further back than Freud and Marx and uh, uh, or I would go back to the Enlightenment, the idea, the tabula rasa, and the disassociation, and the idea that science and reason have taken us out of this archaic idea of mythology and religion, and we're better than that now. We're smarter than that now. Because the religious thematic, if you want to think about it in that term, in a grandiose term, of of God's actions in the world. That is what unifies. The creator of everything is what unifies us all together. The constantly active and present presence of God in and through everything that we do is a grounding force of culture. But since the Enlightenment, and certainly, in the last two generations, people have tried to separate those two things out. They try to separate out their faith and their religious traditions and things like that, and keep that in a section over here. Work is over here. My personal faith is over here. Never the two shall meet. And we feel almost apologetic anytime we have to bring up our faith or talk about our faith. And yet that's exactly the thing that binds us together in a culture. But because we feel the need to closet it or separate it out or separate out reason and faith from each other, we lose the grounds of culture. And then what are we left with? We're left with just the accidental aspects of it. We're left with just the food and the clothing and the traditional dances and things like that. We say, oh, well, that must be culture then, because we can't look underneath and what is the true grounds of it, because that's religion, that's faith, that's mythology, that's those unreasonable, non-scientific aspects of our existence that we have to keep inside. And because we separate ourselves from that, we separate ourselves from the grounds of culture, we separate ourselves from our existence in culture. So, yeah, I think certainly the last two generations have had an effect on that. I think certainly the boomer generation has had a negative effect on that as well. But I think it goes even further back than that. And I think the only really way to affect that is by reclaiming that aspect of the grounds of our culture and reinvigorating our faith in the public square. I saw a really encouraging news story recently about the rise in young people attending Catholic church again. And again, I'm not Catholic, so I mean, any church, I'm in favor of young people getting reconnected to God, whether it's Catholic or Protestant or what have you. But we need more of that. We need more people to openly proclaim their faith and not be afraid of it, not try to separate it out, but to share it and inform those around us about it, so we can rebuild our connection to the underlying grounds of culture. That we could better connect in our own culture, through our own culture, and then all those things that we've lost can start coming back. So, well, that is my little soapbox for today. So I'm going to return to my honest coffee and my decent tobacco. Hope you have a lovely week. As always, happy reading.